Today, I'm going to tell you the unbelievable story of Sophia Reed, a woman who ran through the stormy streets of Chicago to escape her violent ex. In desperation, she hid inside the trunk of a stranger's car, thinking it was her only chance to survive. But the stranger wasn't just anyone. He was Dominic Moretti, the most feared man in the city and the one destined to rewrite her life forever. Rain pelted the streets of Chicago as she ran for her life. Her heart thundered in her chest, every beat urging her forward while fear pressed like a cold blade against her spine. Sophia darted down a dimly lit parking garage, shoes slapping against puddles on the concrete floor. Behind her, the enraged shouts of her ex-boyfriend echoed, too close for comfort. Trevor's voice ricocheted off the pillars, a snarled promise that he would find her. She clutched her side where a fresh bruise throbbed beneath her coat, a painful reminder of their latest confrontation. She'd made the decision to escape tonight after months of planning and stolen courage. But she hadn't expected Trevor to follow her so quickly, to chase her into the night like a predator hunting prey. Her breath hitched as she scanned for an escape route. Up ahead, a sleek black car idled near an exit, its engine a low purr in the gloom. One of its doors was open, an interior light spilling out, but no one was in sight. The trunk, she realized, was slightly ajar. Perhaps whoever owned the car was loading something or had stepped away. A wild, desperate idea sparked in her mind. Footsteps pounded behind her. Trevor was gaining. "You can't hide from me, Sophia," he barked, his tone boiling with that familiar poisonous rage. Adrenaline overruled caution. Sophia darted toward the black car, fingers trembling as she lifted the trunk lid the rest of the way. It was empty save for a neatly folded blanket and a polished black umbrella. A surge of relief and terror mingled in her stomach. She had seconds at most. Without further hesitation, she hoisted herself into the trunk. It was a tight fit around her petite frame, but she managed to curl up, pulling the blanket partly over herself for concealment. Carefully, she lowered the trunk lid, leaving it open just a crack so she wouldn't be plunged into complete darkness. And so she could breathe. Her entire body shook as she lay there, trying to make no sound. Through the small gap, she could see the blurred figure of Trevor entering the far side of the garage, scanning frantically. She clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a sob, tears of fear pricking her eyes. Heavy footfalls drew closer. Trevor was coming row by row, checking behind pillars and parked cars. He was panting, enraged and desperate. "Sophia!" he shouted, voice cracking. "You can't run from me. We're not done." His voice sent a spike of terror through her. Memories flashed, his hands grabbing her arms too hard, the cruel twist of his lips when he'd whisper threats cloaked as promises of love. Sophia squeezed her eyes shut. Not again. She'd die before going back to that hell. Suddenly, another pair of footsteps echoed, these much quieter, but confident, unhurried. A deep voice, smooth as velvet but edged with ice, cut through the garage. "Is there a problem here?" Through the crack, Sophia saw two figures. Trevor had whirled around. Facing him was a tall man emerging from the shadows near the elevator. A man in a tailored charcoal suit, hands in his pockets, utterly calm amidst the tension. Even from her limited vantage, she caught a glimpse of chiseled features under the dim lights, and eyes that looked black as night. "This doesn't concern you," Trevor spat. He took a step back, momentarily thrown off by the stranger's sudden appearance. The suited man tilted his head ever so slightly. A faint smirk played on his lips, but his eyes were dead serious. "It does if you're trespassing on private property," he said coolly. He nodded toward the row of luxury vehicles, including the one Sophia hid inside. "These premises are closed. You shouldn't be here," Trevor bristled. Even at a distance, Sophia could see the flicker of uncertainty in his posture. Her ex was tall and broad, a menacing force to her, but the newcomer somehow dwarfed him with an aura alone. The stranger's casual stance belied a coiled power, like a predator that hadn't decided whether to strike. "I'm looking for someone," Trevor snarled, trying to maintain his bravado. "My girlfriend." "This is none of your business, pal. Walk away." The man in the suit stepped forward until he was under the fluorescent garage light. Sophia's breath caught. His face was harshly handsome, all hard angles and stark shadows, a few days' stubble lining a strong jaw. He looked to be in his early 30s. There was a faint scar over his left brow that only added to the intensity, but what struck her most was the controlled calm in his expression, as if nothing in the world could truly faze him. "Funny," the man drawled quietly, dark eyes flicking around as if bored. "All I see here is a trespasser bothering me and my property." He gestured slightly with one hand. And only then did Sophia notice a second man standing a few paces behind him. A broad-shouldered figure in a black jacket watching silently. Security, she realized. Or something like it. They flanked Trevor subtly. For the first time that night, Sophia felt the scales of power shifting. Her ex was outnumbered and off balance. He eyed the two men warily. "Your property?" he echoed, glancing at the expensive cars. The stranger in the suit smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "That's right. And you're making a scene in it." He slipped a hand inside his suit jacket. For one heart-stopping moment, Sophia thought he might pull a gun. Instead, he withdrew a sleek phone. "Perhaps I should call the police and report an intruder," he suggested. "No!" Trevor snapped, almost too quickly. Sophia knew why. He wouldn't want police involved. The last time they intervened, a restraining order had been placed against him. He was already skating on thin ice with the law. Trevor's hesitation confirmed it. He didn't want cops asking questions. A tense silence fell. Sophia hardly dared to breathe in her cramped hiding spot. Rain drummed on the roof of the garage, and a distant horn echoed from the street outside. Finally, Trevor took a step back, frustration contorting his face. He shot one more hateful look around, eyes sweeping past the very car where she lay curled mere feet away. She shrank further beneath the blanket, heart hammering. "Please don't find me. This isn't over," Trevor hissed, clearly to himself as much as to the stranger. He began to retreat, footsteps echoing toward the exit ramp. "You hear me? I'll find you, Sophia. You can't hide forever," he shouted into the emptiness, voice carrying an ugly mix of rage and obsession. Sophia felt a chill even as he finally disappeared from sight. His words weren't a threat. They were a vow. Silence settled. She remained in the trunk, every muscle taut. Part of her wanted to leap out and run in the opposite direction of Trevor, to put miles between them. Another part feared that any movement might draw the attention of the two men still nearby. She didn't know who they were, only that the one in the suit had likely saved her from being caught, albeit unintentionally. Her reprieve was short-lived. The tall man in the suit turned to the second man. "Luca, do a sweep. Make sure he's gone," he ordered softly. His voice, though quiet, held authority that couldn't be questioned. The one called Luca nodded and moved off in the direction Trevor had gone, hand inside his jacket, presumably on a weapon. The leader, he had to be the leader, stood alone now, just a few feet from the black car that concealed her. Sophia's pulse raced. Her mind caught up with her surroundings fully for the first time. She was hiding in the trunk of what was clearly this man's car. And not just any man. If the deference of his guard and the way he carried himself were indicators. He seemed dangerous in a whole new way, a refined, confident danger that made her both fearful and oddly curious. She had to get out of here before he discovered her. Who knew how he'd react to finding a stowaway? He might have saved her from her ex inadvertently, but that didn't mean she was safe with him. She'd heard whispers in the city of criminal organizations, mafia families operating in the shadows. The cold precision of how he handled Trevor with barely a flick of his hand sent a clear message. This was a man used to being obeyed. A man likely familiar with violence. Summoning her courage, Sophia decided to slip away, while he was still keeping watch elsewhere. Carefully, she inched the trunk open just enough to peek. The man's back was turned as he scanned the garage, a hand now casually resting at his side. She saw his posture stiffen slightly, alert. He was listening for any sign of the threat returning. Now or never, she pushed the lid open a bit more. In a blur of motion, he spun around. Before Sophia could react, a strong hand shot out and gripped the trunk lid, throwing it open fully. Light flooded her hiding spot. She gasped, instinctively scrambling backward, but there was nowhere to go. A flash of lightning from outside lit his face, highlighting the sharp cut of his cheekbones and the intensity in his eyes as he loomed over the trunk. He looked as startled as she felt for a split second. Clearly, he hadn't expected to find a person tucked away with his umbrella and blanket. "Well," he said in a low, dangerous murmur. "What do we have here?" Sophia's voice caught in her throat. Rain-slicked and shivering, she stared up at him, wide-eyed. The urge to flee warred with the knowledge she was effectively caught. She pressed herself against the back of the trunk as much as possible, hands trembling. I'm sorry," she managed to stammer, her voice hoarse with fear and lack of breath. "I didn't mean—" He held up his other hand, a gesture for silence. His eyes swept over her quickly, taking in the damp hair plastered to her face, her tear-stained cheeks, the way she clutched the coarse gray blanket against herself like a shield. Up close, those eyes weren't black after all, she realized. They were a deep charcoal, a storm of concern and suspicion swirling in them. "Come out," he ordered, the calm tone belying the steel beneath it. Rain dripped from the ceiling onto the edge of the trunk, splashing onto the polished leather of the car's interior. The man didn't flinch, his focus solely on her. Sophia hesitated. Part of her felt relieved that it was him who found her and not her ex. But stepping out meant facing a new unknown. Who was this man? Did he intend to harm her for intruding, or hand her over to the police? When she didn't move immediately, his brows lowered a fraction. Yet instead of yanking her out, he surprised her. He extended a hand toward her, palm up in an almost civil gesture, as if inviting her trust. Rainwater glistened on his sleeve. "It's all right," he said, more quietly this time. There was a note in his voice she hadn't expected. Reassurance. "You're safe now. Come on out." His words, combined with a gentler tone, coaxed Sophia into motion. Warily, she reached out and placed her trembling hand in his. His hand was warm, enveloping hers with a firmness that sent a strange heat up her arm. With hardly any effort, he helped her out of the trunk. As she stood on unsteady legs, the man's arm hovered near her waist, ready to catch her if she fell. She steadied herself, tugging her damp coat tighter around her small frame. He towered over her by a good foot. Up close, he radiated a quiet power, but his touch had been surprisingly gentle. Now that she stood in front of him, the stranger took a moment to appraise her fully. Sophia flushed under the scrutiny and quickly brushed at her cheeks, wiping away any traces of tears. She lifted her chin, trying to summon some semblance of composure, despite the adrenaline still pumping through her. She refused to crumble again. Not in front of another man. Those intense gray eyes of his flickered with recognition, as if he connected the dots. "He was after you," the man stated rather than asked. There was a dangerous edge to his voice when he referenced Trevor, like a knife glinting under a thin cover of civility. Sophia swallowed. "Yes," she admitted softly. There was no point denying it. She glanced toward the garage entrance where her ex had vanished. Her hands balled into fists at her sides to hide their shaking. "I'm sorry I hid in your car. I didn't know what else to do. He was going to hurt me." Her voice faltered on the last words, humiliation and fear clashing inside her. She hated showing weakness, especially in front of a stranger. But it was the truth. The man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Has he hurt you before?" he asked quietly. Lightning flashed again somewhere outside, illuminating the depths of the garage for a stark second. Sophia met his gaze. Something in those storm-gray eyes told her he wasn't asking idly. There was a current of anger there, not directed at her, but on her behalf, she sensed. "Yes," she whispered. The admission tasted bitter. She reflexively brushed her fingers over the bruise on her side, hidden beneath her clothes. For a moment, the man said nothing. His face could have been carved from stone. It was so still. But his eyes darkened with an emotion she didn't fully understand. Rage, yes, but also something akin to understanding. He took a breath, as if reining himself back. "What's your name?" His tone was still firm, but gentler than before. She hesitated. Should she tell him? He had effectively saved her tonight, but he was still an unknown, a man who commanded enough presence to send her violent ex packing with just a few words. For all she knew, she had leapt out of the frying pan and into the fire. Yet, her instincts nudged that he wouldn't hurt her. If he planned to, he likely would have already, instead of helping her out of the trunk so carefully. And there was genuine curiosity in his gaze now, a quiet patience as he waited for her answer, while chaos still rumbled in the distance. "Sophia," she said finally, her voice steadying a bit. She pressed her lips together, then added, "Thank you for what you did. You didn't have to, but you helped me." He inclined his head slightly, acknowledging her thanks without brushing it off. "I'm Dominic." The way he said it held weight. It was a name that meant something. If not to her, then likely to many others. And the way he watched her, it was as if he expected a flicker of recognition. When none came, the name was unfamiliar to Sophia, beyond a vague feeling she'd heard it whispered somewhere. He raised a brow. Almost in amusement, he added, "Perhaps that's for the best right now." Before she could question that, the one called Luca returned, jogging back from the exit. "Boss, he's gone," Luca reported briskly, eyes flickering to Sophia in surprise. Clearly, finding a drenched woman by the boss's side was not what he expected. "I saw him take off down the street. No sign of anyone else lurking around." Dominic nodded. "Good." He kept his gaze on Sophia. She shifted on her feet, suddenly self-conscious under both men's scrutiny. She must look a mess. Soaked hair, makeup probably smeared from tears, her clothes muddy from crawling into the trunk. Her arms hugged around herself as a chill passed through. Wordlessly, Dominic shrugged off his suit jacket. Before she could protest, he draped it over her shoulders. The sudden warmth and the scent of him, expensive cologne with a hint of smoke, enveloped her. The jacket was far too large, but it was dry, and instantly began to chase away her shivers. Thank you, Sophia said, startled by the kindness. This man continued to defy her expectations. Cold, commanding presence one moment, unexpected protector the next. He simply gave a curt nod. Then his hand gently but firmly touched the small of her back. Sophia tensed at the contact, a reflex after so much abuse, and his hand paused. His eyes searched hers, as if asking permission. When she managed a small nod of consent, he guided her toward the open back door of the black car. "Let's get you out of here," Dominic said. "It's not safe in the open." She knew he was right. Trevor could return or be lying in wait somewhere, and it wasn't lost on her that the man, Dominic, might have his own reasons for urgency. If he truly was the kind of figure she suspected, maybe he didn't want to be around when police eventually patrolled by, or when any number of other threats could emerge. Still, hesitation rooted her feet. Go with a stranger? A man who clearly had dangerous connections? Her instincts were torn. He must have sensed it because he paused, standing by the open car door with her. His expression softened just enough to be reassuring, though his tone remained matter-of-fact. "I won't hurt you, Sophia. I give you my word." Something about the way he said it, quietly but with utter conviction, made her believe him. Or perhaps she just wanted to believe him, because what other choice did she have now? The night had gone from horrifying to surreal. At least with Dominic, she had a chance of getting somewhere safe to figure out her next move. "Okay," she whispered. He helped her into the plush back seat of the car. Luca had already moved to the driver's side, starting the engine. As soon as Dominic settled next to her and closed the door, she heard the locks click shut. Normally, that sound might have triggered panic, being locked in a car with two strange men, but she forced herself to breathe. Dominic had shown her more consideration in 5 minutes than Trevor had in the past year. The car glided out of the garage into the stormy Chicago night. Streetlights streaked across Sophia's face through the rain-speckled window. She snuck a glance at the man sitting beside her. He was staring straight ahead, one elbow on the door armrest, thumb brushing his chin in thought. In the soft light, his profile looked stern, almost regal, like a king contemplating war. Sensing her eyes on him, he turned to meet her gaze. She quickly looked down at her hands. Her fingers picked at the loose thread of the blanket she still clutched around her. Where are we going?" she asked quietly. "To somewhere safe," Dominic answered. "My home." After a beat, he added, "Just for now, until we sort out what to do about your situation." She nodded slowly. She had no idea what the next step would be. Everything in her life had exploded in a matter of hours. All she knew was that as terrifying as this man might be in his own right, sitting next to him, she felt oddly safer than she had in months. Safe enough that as the adrenaline drain set in, exhaustion swept over her. Her head lolled back against the leather seat. She realized distantly that she was still clutching Dominic's jacket around her shoulders. It smelled like him, a scent that was quickly becoming synonymous with safety in her mind. "Try to rest," came Dominic's low voice from beside her. It was almost gentle. "We have a bit of a drive." Sophia wanted to ask how far, where exactly his home was, a dozen other questions that flitted through her mind like restless birds. But her body betrayed her. Now that immediate danger had passed, it had nothing left. The adrenaline crash made her eyelids heavy. As the car sped along wet roads, she let them drift shut, still clutching the blanket and jacket tightly. The last thing she felt before sleep pulled her under was a weight settling around her shoulders. Through a fog, she realized Dominic had reached over and gently pulled the blanket more securely around her, tucking it near her chin. It was a small kindness, but it sent warmth blooming in her chest. Protected, was her last drowsy thought. For now, I'm protected. Dominic watched as Sophia finally succumbed to exhaustion, her head resting against the car's headrest, face softened in sleep. He found himself glancing at the sleeping woman beside him more often than he intended, a flicker of something unfamiliar tugging at his hardened heart. The world blurred by as she dozed. When Sophia next opened her eyes, The car was gliding through wrought iron gates. Beyond them stretched a long driveway lined with softly glowing lights. She sat up, blinking away the haze of sleep, and peered out. Silhouettes of manicured trees and hedges emerged in the downpour. At the end of the drive, a grand estate loomed against the stormy sky. Warm light spilled from tall windows across the lawn. Sophia's breath caught. She had expected perhaps an apartment or a modest house, not this display of wealth and power. The building was a stately mansion of sand-colored stone, 3 stories tall at least, with elegant arches and a fountain visible in front of the main entrance. It looked more like a small palace than a home. The car came to a gentle stop under the cover of a pillared portico. Luca quickly exited, umbrella in hand, and circled around to open their door. Dominic stepped out first, then turned and offered Sophia his hand once more. She accepted it, grateful for balance as she stepped onto solid ground. Her legs were still unsteady from adrenaline and exhaustion. Rain cascaded off the edges of the umbrella Luca held over them. Dominic kept a protective grip on her hand as he led her up the few steps to the grand double doors. They opened before he even reached them. 2 more men in dark suits greeted him with deference. Bodyguards, she realized from their vigilant stances and earpieces. They eyed her curiously but said nothing as Dominic guided her inside. The foyer was breathtaking. Marble floors gleamed under a chandelier's glow. A sweeping staircase curved up to the 2nd floor. Everything looked pristine, elegant, and intimidatingly expensive. Sophia stood dripping on the marble, suddenly self-conscious of the puddle forming at her feet. Water slid from her coat and Dominic's jacket still around her shoulders. Dominic barked a quiet order to one of the waiting men. Tell Maria to bring towels and the first aid kit, and have a guest room prepared. The guard nodded and hurried off. You really didn't have to do all this, Sophia began, her voice small in the cavernous hall. Dominic's attention snapped back to her. He shrugged out of his damp suit vest, revealing broad shoulders under a fitted white shirt. It's no trouble, he said simply. You're soaked and likely in shock. You need to get warm and cleaned up. There was no softness in his tone exactly, but the matter-of-fact concern was evident. He gently peeled his jacket off her shoulders. I'll have this dried for you, he murmured, handing the drenched garment to the remaining guard, who took it and discreetly left to attend to it. Sophia stood awkwardly, arms wrapped around herself. She couldn't remember the last time she had been anywhere this opulent, or around someone who commanded a small legion of staff. For a fleeting moment she felt like Cinderella at the ball, except her fairy tale was dark and twisted, and midnight had long since passed. Another figure approached across the foyer, a woman in her 50s perhaps, with a kind face and graying hair pulled into a low bun. She carried fluffy white towels and a small medical kit. Thank you, Maria, Dominic said as he took the towels. The woman gave Sophia a quick once-over, concern in her eyes. Oh, you poor thing, Maria clucked softly. Let's get you dried off, dear. She bustled forward and draped one towel around Sophia's shoulders, rubbing gently to absorb the rain from her hair. Sophia found herself momentarily overwhelmed by the simple kindness. It felt foreign after so long having to fend for herself. I'm okay, thank you, she said quietly. Maria smiled kindly. Of course. Let me see about that guest room. I'll turn up the heat in there and set out some clothes. With that, Maria gave Dominic a polite nod and hurried off down a hallway. The warmth of the mansion was already seeping into Sophia's cold bones. She dabbed at her face with the edge of the towel. Dominic watched her silently for a moment before clearing his throat. You have bruises, he said, nodding toward her temple. In one of the mirrors lining the foyer, Sophia caught sight of herself. There was a faint purple mark just at her hairline, a souvenir from when Trevor had slammed her into a wall earlier that evening. She winced, pulling the towel tighter around herself. It's nothing, she whispered. Dominic's expression darkened. It's not nothing. Sit, he instructed, gesturing to a padded bench along the wall. Too weary to argue, Sophia obeyed. Dominic knelt on one knee in front of her, flipping open the first aid kit Maria had brought. Her eyes widened. You don't have to... I can take care of it, she protested, flustered at the sight of this imposing man kneeling at her feet. He ignored her, carefully reaching forward. May I? He asked, surprisingly polite. She nodded, holding still. Dominic's fingers were feather-light as he probed near the bruise on her temple, checking for any deeper injury. The proximity made her acutely aware of him. The subtle spice of his cologne, the way a lock of his dark hair had fallen across his forehead, when he bowed his head to focus on her wound. Sophia's cheeks warmed, but she kept her eyes trained on a point on the wall, trying not to fidget. It had been a long time since anyone touched her with such gentleness. Certainly not Trevor. His touches had been harsh, possessive, painful. Dominic's touch was clinical, yet undeniably careful. "Just a surface bruise," he pronounced. Then, with a tenderness she didn't expect, he dabbed an antiseptic wipe around a small cut she hadn't realized was on her hairline. Probably from broken glass earlier. Trevor had thrown a vase in one of his fits of rage when she told him she was leaving tonight. The wipe stung. Sophia sucked in a breath. Instantly, Dominic's free hand settled on her knee in a steadying gesture. "Easy," he murmured. "I'm sorry. Almost done." Sophia found herself holding her breath as he smoothed a bandage over the cut. His face was inches from hers now, and she could see the fan of dark lashes around those penetrating eyes. Lightning reflected faintly in them from the windows beyond, making them flash silver. "There," he finished, but he didn't pull away immediately. Their eyes met and held. Sophia's heart gave an unexpected lurch. For a moment, she felt laid bare under his gaze. Not just physically, but as if he could see every secret fear and pain she carried. It should have terrified her, yet something in his eyes made her feel understood. Realizing his hand was still on her knee, Dominic stood abruptly, breaking the moment. Sophia blinked, releasing a breath she hadn't known she was holding. "I'll show you to your room," he said, his voice back to crisp business. He picked up the medical kit and snapped it shut, then offered a hand to help her up. Sophia took it, and together they ascended the grand staircase. Her wet shoes squeaked faintly on the polished wood steps. She realized she was still leaving a trail of damp footprints and felt a flush of embarrassment. "I'm so sorry for the mess I'm making," she said softly, looking down at the droplets. Dominic glanced back at her. "Don't worry about it. It's just water. The floors have seen worse." He gave a mirthless half-smile, as if recalling something specific, but he didn't elaborate. At the top of the stairs, the halls were dim and quiet, lined with art and soft light from wall sconces. Dominic led her to a door at the far end. He pushed it open, revealing a spacious guest bedroom suite. A plush canopy bed dominated the room, piled with pillows and a thick duvet. A fireplace against one wall crackled with warmth. Someone, Maria, likely, had already set out folded clothes on the bed and left a steaming mug on the bedside table. Sophia stepped in, eyes wide. The room looked more luxurious than any hotel she could dream of affording, yet it also felt cozy, cared for. She inhaled the scent of wood smoke and something herbal. Perhaps the tea in the mug, chamomile by the smell. Dominic hovered by the doorway as if not wanting to intrude. "The bathroom is through that door." He nodded to one side where Sophia glimpsed marble and mirrors. "You'll find toiletries and anything you need. The clothes might not be a perfect fit, but Maria keeps some extras around for guests." "Guests?" Sophia mused. Did he often bring people here? Somehow she doubted he hosted many casual dinner parties or out-of-town relatives. Perhaps business associates or family under his protection, given his position. The way the household ran smoothly at his command suggested this scenario. Him bringing home a terrified woman was unusual. Sophia turned to face him, not quite sure how to express the whirlwind of gratitude and unease swirling in her chest. "Dominic, I don't know how to thank you." She twisted her fingers together. "You saved me tonight. You didn't have to, and now you're giving me a place to stay." He raised a hand lightly, stopping her. "It's all right. Consider yourself my guest, for as long as you need." His tone made it clear there were no strings attached to the offer, at least none that he voiced. "Get some rest. We'll talk more in the morning when you're feeling better." Sophia nodded. Her entire body ached with fatigue and the aftershocks of fear. "Good night," she said softly. She mustered a faint smile. "And thank you again." Something shifted in his eyes at her smile, so fleeting she almost missed it, a gentleness amid the storm. He dipped his chin. "Good night, Sophia." Dominic pulled the door closed as he left. Sophia listened to his footsteps retreat down the hall until they disappeared, and only then did she truly relax. She allowed herself to properly exhale for what felt like the first time all night. The silence of the room pressed softly around her, interrupted only by the crackle of the fire. Safe. She was safe here, at least for now. The weight of that realization almost brought her to tears. But she'd cried enough tonight. Now she simply felt numb and bone-weary. Moving on autopilot, Sophia peeled off her soaked coat and ruined blouse. A livid bruise was forming along her ribcage where Trevor had grabbed her earlier. She winced and wrapped one of the soft towels around herself, grateful for its warmth and the subtle scent of lavender detergent. Maria's doing, no doubt. She stepped into the bathroom and was floored by the sheer luxury inside. A marble-soaking tub, a glass-enclosed shower big enough for 3 people, heated floors warming her cold toes. It was tempting to linger, to wash the night off her skin with a hot shower, but exhaustion won out over vanity. Instead, she quickly cleaned up at the sink, using the delicate soaps provided. In the mirror, she finally faced herself. A pale, tired face stared back, amber brown eyes shadowed by smudged mascara and fatigue. A white bandage now adorned her temple, courtesy of Dominic's care. She gingerly touched it, thinking of how gentle his hands had been. "Who are you, Dominic?" she wondered silently. A dangerous man, that was clear, possibly a criminal. But he'd shown her more compassion in hours than she expected from any stranger, let alone a mafia boss, if that's indeed what he was. She had no doubt now that he was involved in some underworld business. The mansion, the guards, his authoritative air, and the way he'd essentially chased off her ex like it was just another Tuesday night chore. The pieces fit. Sophia had spent a year in terror of a violent man, yet here she was under the roof of another man who likely was responsible for far worse violence in his lifetime. It didn't make sense that she felt safer here, but she did. Maybe it was the fact that Dominic had been so composed, so controlled in dealing with Trevor. He didn't hurt or threaten her. He hadn't even needed to physically harm Trevor to send him scurrying. Power tempered by restraint. It was oddly reassuring. Back in the bedroom, Sophia found the clothes left out for her. A pair of soft cotton pajamas, probably Maria's own or bought for guests. She slipped them on. They were a bit roomy, but clean and comfortable. She drank a few sips of the chamomile tea, letting its warmth settle her nerves. When she finally climbed into the bed, she nearly sighed at how soft it was. The sheets were cool and smooth, the pillows cradling her head just right. It was a far cry from the sleepless nights listening for Trevor's footsteps in the hall of her old apartment, or the hard mattress at the women's shelter she'd stayed in briefly when first trying to get away. As she lay there, staring at the dancing shadows from the fireplace, Sophia tried to process everything. Less than a day ago, she was packing a bag and steeling herself to break away from Trevor's hold once and for all. And now she was here, in a stranger's mansion, under the protection of a man whose very name likely made lesser criminals quake. She knew she should feel fear. She did a little, but not of Dominic exactly. Rather, she feared what came next. Trevor wouldn't give up easily. Would he try to find her? Almost certainly. And what would he do if he discovered she was with another man? Trevor's jealousy was as dangerous as his temper. Sophia swallowed thickly, a shiver of worry working through her. One thing was for certain. She couldn't bring trouble to Dominic's doorstep. He had already done more than enough by saving her tonight. She couldn't stay indefinitely, putting him and his people at risk of Trevor's madness or drawing unwanted attention. Tomorrow, she would have to think of a plan. Some way to ensure her ex could never harm her again, without relying solely on the charity of a powerful stranger. Yet as her eyes drifted shut, lulled by the quiet crackling fire, Sophia couldn't help but feel an overwhelming gratitude. Maybe fate had finally given her a sliver of mercy by crossing her path with Dominic's. Downstairs, Dominic sat in his study with an untouched whiskey, mind churning. He was astonished by how fiercely he already wanted to protect Sophia. The memory of her terror and her bravery stirred something deep in him. She had slipped past the ice around his heart in a matter of hours, and he quietly vowed that as long as she stayed under his roof, no one would hurt her ever again. Morning arrived gray and calm. Sunlight fought its way through heavy clouds as Sophia awoke in the massive canopy bed. For a disorienting moment, she didn't know where she was. Then the soft crackle of cooling embers in the fireplace and the unfamiliar luxury around her brought the night's events rushing back. She was in Dominic's mansion, safe. She sat up slowly, testing the aches in her body. Her ribs protested from the bruise, and her head felt tender near the bandaged cut, but otherwise she was all right. More rested than she had been in ages, in fact. The digital clock on the nightstand read 9:47 a.m. She rarely ever slept this late, but her body clearly needed it. Sophia dressed in a simple outfit Maria had provided, a soft knit sweater and leggings that were a bit large but comfortable. She found her phone tucked into her coat pocket on a chair. The battery was dead after being left on all night. Perhaps that was for the best. She wasn't ready to see any missed calls or messages Trevor might have left. Taking a steadying breath, Sophia stepped out of the room. The house was quiet as she made her way down the grand staircase, the events of the previous night replaying in her mind. With daylight, part of her wondered if Dominic might regret bringing a stranger home. Maybe he would consider her a nuisance now, eager to be rid of the complications she brought. These worries were swiftly dispelled as she followed the sound of clinking dishes to a sunlit breakfast nook overlooking a garden courtyard. Dominic stood at a sideboard pouring coffee, talking in low tones to Luca, who was checking something on a tablet. At Sophia's soft knock on the doorframe, Dominic looked up. The guarded mask he'd been wearing melted into something almost warm when he saw her. He was dressed more casually today, in a black sweater rolled up at the sleeves and dark trousers. The attire made him seem slightly less formidable, though no less striking. "Good morning," he greeted. He set down the coffee pot. "How are you feeling?" Luca offered Sophia a polite nod and murmured an excuse before slipping out, giving them space. Sophia stepped inside, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Morning, I'm all right, thank you." She mustered a small smile. "Better than I expected to be." Dominic gestured toward the breakfast table, where an array of food was laid out. Fresh fruit, pastries, eggs, and what looked like homemade sausages. "Please, help yourself. Maria insists on overfeeding everyone." There was a faint note of fond exasperation in his voice at the mention of the housekeeper. Sophia's cheeks warmed. "This is too much. I don't think I can—" Her stomach, betraying her, let out a low growl at the aromas wafting from the table. Dominic's lips twitched, the ghost of a smile. "Sit," he said, pulling out a chair for her. "Eat what you can." She obeyed, unable to resist the lure of real food. As Dominic poured her a cup of coffee, Sophia realized she couldn't recall the last time someone had taken such care to provide for her needs. Certainly not Trevor. He'd barely let her eat at times, criticizing her weight or using meals as another venue for control. Pushing aside those dark thoughts, she thanked Dominic for the coffee and took a sip. It was rich and smooth, warming her from within. He sat across from her, adding a piece of toast to his plate. "Maria said you slept soundly," he remarked. Sophia bit into a strawberry, savoring its sweetness. "Like a rock," she admitted. "It's been a while since I've felt that safe." Dominic's gaze flickered up to meet hers. "Good." Just that one word, but the way he said it carried weight. Like her feeling safe under his roof was a matter of personal importance to him. They ate in a comfortable silence for a few minutes. Outside, a sparrow landed on the stone windowsill, pecking at a stray crumb and drawing Sophia's attention briefly. The normalcy of the morning felt surreal compared to last night's terror. Halfway through her omelet, Sophia realized Dominic was studying her, an unreadable expression on his face. She dabbed her mouth with the napkin, suddenly self-conscious. "Is something wrong?" He shook his head. "No, I was just thinking you're handling all of this remarkably well, considering—" He trailed off, but she knew what he meant. "Considering you were running for your life just hours ago, and now you're here with a stranger." Sophia set her fork down. "I think I'm still in a bit of shock," she admitted honestly. "But I'm managing." Dominic studied her with a keen intensity. "And Trevor? How long were you with him?" She swallowed. It was only fair she offer some explanation. "About 2 years. We met at work. He was charming at first, but then—" She picked at an invisible thread on her sweater, gathering courage. "Then he became someone I didn't recognize. Controlling, angry. He'd isolate me, get jealous over the smallest things. The first time he hit me, he apologized afterward for days. I believed he'd changed, but—" Her voice had gone flat, distant. She forced herself to look up at Dominic. His expression had hardened, not in judgment of her, but in anger on her behalf, she realized. "Men like that don't change easily," Dominic said quietly. "They just learn new ways to hurt and control." Sophia nodded. "I learned that the hard way. I tried to leave him a few times. He always found me. Last night was the final straw. I told him I was done. I was leaving for good. Her hand unconsciously went to her bruised ribs. He didn't take it well. The mug in Dominic's hand audibly creaked under the pressure of his grip. Sophia noticed and instinctively reached out, her fingers lightly touching his clenched fist. "I got away," she said softly. "That's what matters. Thanks to you." Dominic looked down at her small hand atop his, and gradually his fingers unfurled. Her touch seemed to ground him. He turned his palm up. briefly giving her hand a reassuring squeeze before releasing it. The gesture made her heart skip. So protective, yet respectful. His voice was low, controlled. "He won't ever hurt you again, Sophia. That I promise." There was such conviction in the words that she almost believed he could guarantee something so absolute. She wanted to trust that promise, and a large part of her did. But she knew Trevor's obsessive nature. "I appreciate that. But Trevor, he doesn't give up easily. I'm afraid he might come after me, and I don't want to cause trouble for you." Dominic's eyes flashed. "Let him come," he said, steel underlying each syllable. "He'd be a fool to trespass on my territory again." Sophia bit her lip. The memory of Dominic and his guard facing down Trevor last night came back to her. Trevor had been terrified then. He might think twice about approaching Dominic directly, but Trevor might try other methods. Trevor might try to manipulate the situation, she said. He could call the police, for example. Tell them I'm missing or that I was kidnapped by... She hesitated, not sure how to phrase it without potentially offending him. By a dangerous criminal? Dominic finished for her, a hint of wry humor in his tone. She flushed. I didn't mean... He waved it off. "It's all right. I am who I am, Sophia. I don't pretend to be a saint." His jaw tightened momentarily. "If the cops show up here, I can handle them. But I won't force you to stay here against your will. If you want to go to the police yourself, or leave, you're free to do so." Sophia was quiet for a moment, absorbing that. He was giving her an out, yet a part of her was relieved, not eager at the thought. "I don't think going to the police will do much. I tried that route. Restraining orders, reports. Trevor either charmed his way out of trouble or got a slap on the wrist. It only made him more careful and angry." She sighed, swirling her spoon in her coffee. "And leaving? With no plan or resources, he'd find me again. Maybe I could go to another city eventually, but..." She trailed off, not wanting to reveal that her savings were meager. Trevor had drained her finances too, insisting on controlling money. Another tether she had yet to fully sever. Dominic's gaze softened almost imperceptibly. "Then stay, at least until we figure out a permanent solution." Before she could respond, a sharp trill broke the quiet. Dominic pulled a phone from his pocket and glanced at the screen, frowning. "Excuse me a moment." He stepped to the far side of the room to answer. Sophia tried not to eavesdrop, instead nibbling a piece of toast, but Dominic's voice grew taut. "What do you mean at the front gate?" "All right, keep them there. I'm on my way." He hung up, lips pressed into a thin line. "Is everything okay?" she ventured. His dark eyes met hers. "We have visitors. The police, as you predicted. A detective and 2 officers are at my gate asking about a missing person. You." Sophia's stomach flipped. So soon, Trevor wasted no time. What should I do?" she asked, pulse quickening. The idea of police involved, here in Dominic's world, filled her with apprehension. Dominic considered for a second. "Do you want to speak to them?" Did she? Would it make things better or worse? If Trevor had fed them some story about her being abducted, would they even believe her if she said otherwise? And if any of these officers were on Dominic's payroll or his rivals, this could be more complicated. "I don't know," she admitted. "I'm not afraid of the police themselves, but Trevor might have spun things. And if they take me out of here..." Her voice faltered. She hadn't felt truly safe until she came here. The thought of leaving these protected walls to go... where? Back into the open where Trevor lurked. It chilled her. Dominic stepped closer, his expression gentling. He rested a hand on her shoulder in a steadying gesture. "I won't let them take you anywhere you don't want to go. Understand?" She nodded, heart calmed by the resolve in his face. "All right," he said. "Come. We'll talk to them together." A short while later, Sophia stood beside Dominic in the grand entry hall as 2 uniformed officers and a plainclothes detective were escorted in. Rainwater dripped from their coats onto the marble. The detective introduced himself as Detective Reynolds and said they were responding to a report that she was missing and possibly being held here. Sophia's nerves fluttered, but she squared her shoulders. With Dominic at her side, she firmly told the detective that she was safe and here by choice. Yes, she'd had an altercation with her ex-boyfriend, but Dominic had only helped her escape a dangerous situation. "I'm not kidnapped or in distress," she insisted, meeting Detective Reynolds' eyes steadily. "Quite the opposite. I might still be in danger if it weren't for Mr. Moretti." Reynolds looked between Sophia and Dominic skeptically, but there was little he could do. He had no evidence of wrongdoing, especially with Sophia plainly saying she was fine. After a few more pointed questions and Sophia's calm, consistent answers, the detective's posture eased. Satisfied, if a bit perplexed by the scenario, he apologized for the intrusion. The police departed soon after, leaving the mansion quiet once more. As the door closed, Sophia let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Anger bubbled up as she thought of Trevor's audacity. "That conniving snake," she muttered, hands clenched at her sides. He had actually tried to weaponize the police to drag her back. Dominic's eyes flashed with sympathy and simmering anger of his own. "He's desperate," he said. "But it changes nothing. You handled that well." Sophia looked up at him. "Thank you for standing by me through that. I'm sorry you got dragged into my mess." Dominic's expression softened. "Don't apologize. I've dealt with far worse than a couple of suspicious cops." His lips curved wryly. "I meant what I said. I won't let anyone take you from here." Emotion welled in Sophia's chest. The past day had been a roller coaster of terror and relief, and through it all this man, practically a stranger, had been her steadfast protector. Impulsively, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Dominic in a hug. He went still for half a second, clearly caught off guard. Then, slowly, his muscled arms came around her, one hand cradling the back of her head as if to shield her. Sophia closed her eyes, blinking back a tear. "Thank you," she whispered. It was all she could manage, but it carried a world of meaning. Dominic's voice came softly above her head. "You're welcome." There was a slight rasp to it, an unspoken depth of feeling. They lingered in the embrace for a long moment. Sophia felt safe and small against his solid chest, the steady thump of his heartbeat strong under her cheek. Eventually they drew apart, both a touch bashful. Sophia noticed a light in Dominic's eyes that hadn't been there before, as if her simple act of trust had chipped away at another of his defenses. They parted only when Luca approached with urgent updates. Dominic's team had dug into Trevor's background and discovered a pattern of abuse and a flurry of desperate moves that morning. Trevor had been calling Sophia's workplace and friends, spreading lies that she was unstable and had run off. He was trying to smoke her out by ruining her reputation and finding anyone who knew her. The news made Sophia's blood boil, but Dominic squeezed her hand, silently promising that Trevor would never reach her. Luca also warned that word of Dominic's guest had reached a rival mafia family, the Espositos. They might see Sophia as a weakness to exploit. Dominic's eyes went cold at that, and he immediately doubled security around the estate. Sophia, guilt gnawing at her, offered to leave if it meant keeping Dominic safe from fallout. He refused vehemently, his voice turning fierce as he vowed he would never abandon her or let anyone lay a finger on her. Before Sophia could protest, another call came. The team watching Trevor had lost him. He'd slipped their surveillance and vanished. Dominic's jaw set in grim determination. Trevor was surely on the move, perhaps lurking at a place Sophia might return to. "We'll go to your apartment now," Dominic announced, turning to her. "If he's waiting for you there, we'll deal with him once and for all." Sophia's heart pounded at the thought of facing Trevor again. But with Dominic beside her, she felt a surge of resolve. She nodded. "Let's end this," she agreed softly. 15 minutes later, Sophia found herself in the back of an armored SUV as they headed across town. Luca drove, with Dominic beside her and another car of his men following close behind. The city streets flashed by in the cold light of afternoon. Sophia's old neighborhood appeared, a row of modest brick apartment buildings. They reached her small apartment, and Sophia hurried to gather her essentials. With Dominic and his men standing guard, she tossed some clothes, important documents, and a cherished family photo into a duffel bag. They were nearly finished when heavy footsteps pounded up the stairwell. "Sophia!" a voice bellowed from below. Her blood ran cold. Trevor. He stormed up to her floor, face contorted with fury, only to find one of Dominic's guards barring his way at the top of the stairs. "That's far enough," the guard said coldly, planting himself in Trevor's path. Trevor, disheveled and wild-eyed, pointed a finger past him. You have no right to keep me from her." "Sophia, come here," he roared, trying to shoulder past the guard. Dominic appeared at the stairwell, landing beside his guard, his posture relaxed, but his eyes burning like embers. "She's not going anywhere with you," he said, voice low and lethal. "Don't take another step." Trevor's gaze snapped to Dominic, and a sneer twisted his features. "The big bad mafia man, huh?" he spat. "Think you can steal my girlfriend and get away with it?" Dominic's stance remained at ease. but Sophia noticed his hand flex at his side as if itching for action. "She's not your girlfriend, and you're trespassing," he said evenly. Trevor tried to peer around the men to see Sophia, who stood a few steps behind, clutching her duffel. "Sophia, he's brainwashed you or something. You think he actually cares about you? You're just a toy for him. These kinds of men they use and throw away. That's rich coming from you," Sophia cut in, stepping forward before Dominic or his guard could respond. Anger flared white-hot in her veins, burning away the residual fear. She was tired of hearing Trevor talk as if he had any claim over her. Planting her feet, she glared down the stairs at him. "Trevor, we are done. I left because you're an abusive, controlling liar. I'd rather take my chances with 100 dangerous men than ever go back to you." Trevor's eyes bulged at her outburst, as if he couldn't believe she dared speak to him that way. In truth, Sophia couldn't quite believe it either. Her voice shook with the intensity of her feelings. But it felt good, years of pent-up hurt pouring out at last. "You ungrateful bitch," Trevor seethed. He lunged upward, trying to grab her despite the guard's blockade. It happened in a blink. Dominic surged forward, one strong arm shooting out to grab Trevor by the collar. In a single motion, he slammed Trevor back against the stairwell wall. The old plaster cracked under the impact. Trevor let out a strangled gasp, his feet barely touching the steps, as Dominic held him up with an arm pressed hard to his throat. Dominic's voice was deadly calm. "You've made a lot of mistakes, Trevor," he said, face inches from the other man's. One was ever laying a finger on her. Another was coming here today. Trevor's hands clawed uselessly at Dominic's forearm as he choked for air. "She's mine," he wheezed stubbornly. "You can't take her!" Dominic's eyes blazed. "Open your eyes. She doesn't belong to you. She's not property. And if you ever come near her again, I will end you. Nod if you understand me." Trevor's face had gone red. He managed a jerky nod, fear finally dawning in his expression as Dominic's words sank in. Dominic yanked him forward an inch, then slammed him back once more for emphasis. Trevor winced, a whimper escaping. "If you even speak her name again," Dominic growled, "I'll make you regret the day you were born." Another nod. Or perhaps just Trevor trembling. Either satisfied or disgusted, Dominic released him. Trevor crumpled to the stairs, coughing and gulping down air. "Get him out of here," Dominic ordered his men, voice sharp. The guard hauled Trevor up by the back of his jacket and half-dragged him down the steps. Trevor didn't even struggle now. The fight had been completely beaten out of him. As he was manhandled out the building's front door, he threw one last hateful glance over his shoulder. But Sophia stepped into view beside Dominic, her chin held high and her eyes flashing warningly, and Trevor finally turned away. When he was gone, Sophia sagged with relief. All the adrenaline that had buoyed her through the confrontation drained, leaving her trembling. "It's over," she whispered, hardly believing it. "He's gone." Dominic turned to her immediately. "Sophia..." His concern was evident in the furrow of his brow. Before he could say more, Sophia closed the distance between them and flung her arms around him, burying her face against his chest. This time Dominic didn't hesitate. He enveloped her in his strong embrace, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other rubbing slow circles over her back. "It's all right," he murmured into her hair. "You're all right. I've got you." Sophia let out a shaky breath. She was all right. Trevor was gone, at least for now, and she was in the arms of a man who had just moved heaven and earth to protect her. Emotion swelled, threatening to overwhelm her. She leaned back slightly to gaze up at Dominic. Rain from a broken window somewhere upstairs pattered in the silence as they looked at each other. The intensity of his gray eyes made her heart flip. In that charged moment, gratitude and admiration and attraction collided inside her. Sophia rose onto her toes and pressed her lips to Dominic's. It was a soft, grateful kiss, yet the spark that shot through her was anything but gentle. Dominic made a low sound of surprise, then responded without hesitation. His hand slid to the small of her back, pulling her closer as he returned the kiss with growing passion. Sophia melted into him, a thrill coursing through her. Despite the chaos and danger that had brought them together, this kiss felt so achingly right. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing a bit unsteadily. Dominic rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed as if composing himself. "Sophia," he began softly, voice rough, but was interrupted by Luca calling from outside that the scene was secure. They parted reluctantly. Dominic brushed a strand of hair from Sophia's face, his thumb grazing her cheek with a tenderness that made her heart ache. Without a word, They both knew something had changed irrevocably between them. Trust had blossomed into something deeper. Over the next 2 days, Sophia and Dominic grew closer within the sanctuary of his home. They shared quiet meals and gentle conversation, both finding unexpected comfort in each other's company. But beneath the calm, Dominic remained on high alert. He knew the peace was tenuous, and he was right. 2 nights later, the Espositos struck back. Sophia woke to the sound of gunfire shattering the midnight silence. The estate's alarms blared as armed men breached the grounds. Heart-hammering, Sophia scrambled out of bed and into the hallway. A guard rushed past, shouting that they were under attack. Before Sophia could react, a masked intruder burst through a side door and grabbed her. "Let's see how your mafia boyfriend likes this," the man snarled, locking an arm around her neck as a human shield. Sophia fought back, kicking and twisting despite the terror coursing through her. The intruder dragged her toward the stairs, intent on taking her hostage. A gunshot cracked from behind them. The intruder jerked and released Sophia with a pained yell. Dominic stood at the end of the hall, smoking pistol in hand and fury etched on his face. One of his bullets had found its mark in the man's shoulder. Sophia tore free and dashed toward Dominic. The wounded attacker raised his weapon to shoot, but Dominic was faster. He fired again and the man crumpled to the floor. In the sudden silence, Dominic grabbed Sophia, pulling her tightly against him. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, voice ragged. "I'm okay," she managed, clinging to him. Relief and shock warred within her. Downstairs, Luca shouted, "Boss, we have to go, now!" Through the windows, Sophia saw distant blue lights flashing. Neighbors must have called the police. The remaining gunmen were already retreating into the night, rather than face Dominic's wrath and an incoming SWAT team. Dominic swept Sophia into motion, keeping her shielded against him as they fled down a servant's stairwell toward the garage. His men covered their escape, and within minutes, they were in a car racing away from the estate, just as sirens converged behind them. Sophia's heart remained lodged in her throat, but she felt Dominic's hand trembling around hers on the gear shift. He glanced at her, eyes haunted. "I could have lost you," he rasped. "But you didn't," she whispered, squeezing his hand fiercely. "You saved me. We saved each other." That night, Dominic took Sophia to a secure hideout far from the city. In the quiet safety of a secluded cabin, he finally allowed the fear and guilt to surface. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, brushing a bruise on her cheek with trembling fingers. "I almost lost you. I can't bear the thought." Sophia placed her hand over his. "You didn't lose me. I'm right here," she murmured. Seeing the torment in his eyes, her heart swelled. How could he not realize what he meant to her? "Dominic, I love you," she confessed softly, voice steady and true. His breath caught. For a moment he simply stared, as if daring to believe. "I love you, Sophia," he rasped at last, the words laden with all the emotion he'd held back. She smiled through rising tears of joy, and he pulled her into a kiss. It started gentle, a question answered in kind, then quickly ignited into all the pent-up passion and relief of surviving the impossible. In each other's arms they found warmth and healing. That night, tangled together beneath the soft glow of the fire, they finally surrendered completely to the solace of each other's love. In the days that followed, Dominic moved decisively to eliminate every remaining threat. The Esposito family, faced with his wrath, backed off for good, and Trevor, coward that he was, fled Chicago rather than face Dominic again. At last, peace returned. One warm spring evening a few weeks later, Dominic led Sophia up to his rooftop garden overlooking the glittering city skyline. With a soft melody playing and the sunset painting the sky in gold and pink, he drew her into his arms for a slow dance. They swayed together under the open sky, her head on his shoulder and his cheek against her hair. Sophia closed her eyes, savoring the moment. Never had she imagined feeling so safe and loved. "I never thought I'd have this," she whispered, thinking of how far she'd come, from a night of terror to this perfect peace. Dominic gently lifted her chin, his gray eyes warm. "You're my happiness," he murmured, voice rough with emotion. "You changed everything for me, Sophia." Tears of joy sprang to her eyes as she smiled. "We changed each other." His answering smile was radiant. He kissed her, a deep, tender kiss beneath the twilight sky, sealing a promise of forever. As dusk fell, Sophia knew she had finally found the safe haven she had always dreamed of. Together, they had faced down fear and violence and triumphed. Whatever the future brought, they would meet it side by side.